everybody, this is Karla McCavitt from the Math Department and Academic Skills Center, and I'm here to talk about math placement and the ALEKS system. So first, for incoming students, math placement normally will happen in the late spring or over the summer, sometime after the student deposits but before classes are scheduled, and students will access the math placement test in their Britain Bound account. So the test itself has a short questionnaire about their math background and interests, and then there's about a 30-question math test that the students do complete. Students who have credit from AP or IB or transfer credit will be placed according to that credit, and others will be placed according to their ALEKS score and their interest area. Now, what makes ALEKS unique is that the system is paired with individualized lessons for students that they can complete online and then retake the test if they want to improve the preparation and placement. Students do have 1 full year from initial testing to use the system for practice and retesting if they want. They don't have to do that, but they can. Now let's talk a little bit about the testing system itself. The system is called ALEKS, which is a system that relies on knowledge space theory. Now, knowledge space theory is a way of thinking about how concepts are related to each other. So some concepts might be prerequisite to others, and some concepts that are more or less independent of each other may share some prerequisites, or they may form a set of prerequisites for other concepts. So the goal of the assessment is to uncover the student's knowledge state. So a student's knowledge state is the set of concepts that the student has mastered at the point in time that they're taking the test. So if I think of the set of concepts being identified as known, unknown, or ready to learn, then we could think of the knowledge state as those set of concepts that are known. So here we might imagine that different students have different knowledge states, and even the same student may have a different knowledge state at different points in time. So the placement test itself is adaptive, which means each question is chosen based on how the last question was answered. Therefore, each student gets a different test. The test is no more than 30 questions long, and the test questions are all open response, no multiple choice. The test takes about 90 minutes to complete, and the students are not to use any aids, calculators, etc. on the test. Now, note that the test is used to determine the current knowledge state of the student, and the test is not an IQ test or any kind of aptitude test. Now, what does the test look like for students? This is the screen that students will see when they first access ALEKS through their Britain Bound account. This is a demo version of ALEKS here, so some of the settings are different than ours, but the screen looks the same as what our screen will look like for our students. The only difference is our time limit is 24 hours and our tests are all unproctored. So the time limit is 24 hours, and that means students can exit the test and then restart later on within 24 hours of starting it. But if more than 24 hours elapse from the start time, the test actually just erases, and it's like the test never happened. So the test can be exited and re-entered to complete within 24 hours of starting, but after 24 hours, the test erases and the student has to start over. Also, our tests are unproctored, which means, of course, no one is going to watch the student take the test. So the student can take the test anywhere that they have internet access, at home, on campus, off campus, even using their phone. Any of that is perfectly fine, and we encourage them to do that. Now, here's an example of what a test question might look like. So ALEKS is pulling from material typically covered in high school through the level of Algebra 2 and trigonometry. In fact, ALEKS covers 314 topics in about a 30-question test using the knowledge space theory. Okay, here's another example problem. So when the student gets their test question, they can either click I don't know if they can't remember how to do the problem, or they can submit an answer. So note that these questions are open answer questions. They have to type in their answer. They're not multiple choice. Also remember, the test is adaptive, so each question is chosen based on the answer to the previous question. If a question is answered correctly, then Alex assumes that all the prerequisite concepts for that question are known. But if a question is answered incorrectly, then the system takes a step toward the prerequisite concepts to try to test further and tease out what is known versus what is not known. Once the student is finished with the test, then the result and placement is given to the student on the screen. So this is a typical result. They will be given both the percentage here and also a table that shows the cutoff scores for the different classes with their placement highlighted. Now the scores that are given here, or the classes here, again, this is a demo version. Our table looks like this. These are our cut scores for our classes. And that is the table that students will see when they get their score, as well as the class that they place into will be highlighted just as it's highlighted here in the demo version. In addition, at the bottom of the table, there's a link that goes to our math placement website, which has all of the information about cut scores in classes, plus information about the ALEP system, how to retest, and what kinds of classes require which math classes on campus. So they can definitely click on that link and go right to our math placement page and then see how that looks for them. Students can also get detailed breakdown of topics to show them sort of which topics had more knowledge for them and which had less. And so just to point out a couple of things, these topics sort of toward the bottom here are more advanced than the topics toward the top. In other words, the topics toward the bottom would have a lot of prerequisite skills in some of these other top topics here, okay? So if I take one of these more advanced skills like exponentials and logs, the student has reported a 0 of 20 topics here, okay? That means that the system has determined that the student has mastered none of the topics in that particular sub area, okay? That does not mean that the student was asked 20 questions and got 0 of them right, okay? This is all based on the knowledge space theory that if a student answers a more advanced topic correctly, then all of the prerequisites topics will be assumed to be known. But if a student is not getting some of the earlier topics right, then the system is not going to jump ahead and ask them something that's more advanced. It doesn't make sense to do that, and so more than likely the student never even got a question from this sub area because they didn't answer some of the prerequisite skills questions correctly. So at this point, the student has their current placement and they know what they've gotten right and wrong. And the system has identified the concepts the student knows and has identified concepts the student is ready to learn. So the ready to learn topics are used to assign lessons in the learning mode. So the student will get this message. Okay, what's next? Well, you can improve your score by working in the prep and learning mode. They don't have to, but they can. And the way we have our test set up, they can take their placement test up to 4 more times. Now, in between taking tests, the student must do some work in the prep and learning mode. In fact, the student has to spend 3 hours or more practicing in the learning mode, and 48 hours of wait time must elapse between tests. The student has 1 year to do this, but it might be good to do it sooner because it's easy to forget or get out of practice with algebra. And if the student needs to take a math class, it's easier on them to do it early. Plus, it's not like life gets any less busy as time goes on, so we might as well use our breaks to our advantage and try to get this done over the summer if we can, or if not, try to do it maybe over a break. The student is going to get this message. which tells them what prep and learning module they've been assigned into. So Alex will choose one of the prep and learning modules based on the knowledge state of the student, so based on what they got right and wrong on their initial test. The student can go up or down one level from that, okay? Now, different students might be recommended into the same module, but keep in mind that the topics within the module are still going to be individually chosen based on the knowledge state of the different students. So one student might have the Prep for Intermediate Algebra module assigned and have different topics than another student with the same module. Now, the student can choose to go ahead and start the module at that time. Like, they can start it right away, or they can choose not now. And if they do choose not now, then they'll just exit from the program and they can come back later through their written down account to do this at any time within the year. Now, for students, the module is going to be navigated using this thing called the learning pie. So Alex calls this the learning pie. So students will use this. It's a graphical illustration of the portion of each subtopic that was identified as a known topic for that student. So students can actually mouse over these. It's not going to work on this version because I just have a screenshot of it here, but students would mouse over this and a list of topics would come up that they can choose. So this is a live menu for the student. And they can also use these subtopic list here to open up different lessons that they can look at, okay? Before we go and look at another bit of the learning pie detail, let's look at the left bar here and see what it says. So the student's going to see what's recommended as their next topic. So the topic that the Alex system has chosen for them to start with here is the additive property of equality with integers, and they can just go ahead and start that if they want to by clicking start. Down here it shows something about what their placement looks like. So right now they could do their second attempt of 5, okay? Our time limit is going to be 24 hours, not 3 hours, and our tests are unproctored, so it'll say unproctored here, and it won't say anything about lockdown browsers or webcams, which we don't use. But notice that it shows here that it's locked, okay? That's going to remain locked because the student has to both meet the cool down period and the practice period before they can retake a test. So down here, then this area counts down the amount of time that's left in the cool down period and the amount of time that's left to work in the learning mode before the next test will unlock. Once both of those criteria are met, then this will become unlocked and the student can access the next test. They'll do that test just like the first test. They'll get another learning pie, another percentage, another list of topics based on how that second test goes. If they don't like that test, they do this again, right? They go ahead and go through the process again, the waiting period, and the 3 hours of practice. That will unlock the third test. They test again. They can test a total of 5 times within that first year. Now, if someone wants to look at their learning pie detail, then that's going to bring up a different way of looking at what they have listed as their ready to learn topics. So here a student could scroll through here to see the different topics. They can explode these out to see what the topics are in the different sub areas. And then down here is another list that shows the ready to learn topics for each student. Students can go through here in any order. They don't have to go through sequentially. They don't have to start here and then do this one and then do this one and this one. They can hop around. All of these topics are in the ready to learn category for the student, so they have all of their prerequisite skills for those topics. Now, what's going to happen is the list will change as topics are learned and removed from their list, and other topics will then become ready to learn topics, and those will be added to their list. So these lists are ever changing for the students. Now, what do the modules look like? The modules are going to start by asking the student a question, which they can either practice or get an explanation for, depending on how they want to proceed. If the student already knows how to do the question, they just go straight to practice. If they don't, they'll go to the explanation, see if they can figure out how the question is to be solved, and then they can practice. Now, the student must answer a similar type problem 3 times correctly without help in order to move that concept from ready to learn to known in their knowledge space. So it's not like the student just gets an explanation, practices once, gets it right, and then they know that topic. Alex is going to keep cycling through and making sure the student actually does know how to do that, a particular kind of problem before adding that to their knowledge state. Now, this graphic is on the Math Placement website, and it's also given to students in their Britton Bound account. It's pretty nice snapshot of what's happening with the retesting. So basically, the student is going to go ahead and do their assessment, and if they like their assessment score, they can be done. If not, they do 3 hours prep and learn and 48 hours waiting, and then they can retest. Now, Alex data shows that when students spend an average of 5 hours in the prep and learn mode, the retest is at least 1 class higher than it was initially. So while we say the student spends 3 hours in the prep and learn mode, they can spend more time than that. It's at least 3 hours. So a student could spend 5-6 hours in prep and learn and then retest and see a pretty good jump in their score and placement. So what kinds of scores are needed? Well, here's a good rule of thumb. 46 is the cut score for entrance into college algebra, and 74 is the cut score for placement into Calc 1. So if your student is interested in an area that requires skills at the level of college algebra, then they want to score at least a 46. Whereas if your student is interested in an area that is going to use calculus type concepts, then you want to have them test of at least 74. If you do look on the Math Placement website, there's a detailed list of what is required in terms of the math for each of the different majors on campus. Now, some benefits to this approach. First of all, forgetting is normal and expected. So we expect students are going to forget some of the stuff that they learned in high school. So the need to review and practice is common, right? So we want to make sure and normalize this for students, that we really expect most students to have to take the test more than once, unless they've taken a math class very recently. So it's important that we're identifying and repairing gaps on an individual basis. This is much more efficient for the student than having the student complete an identical curriculum to someone else who maybe has a different set of knowledge gaps than they do. Now, students have the power in the system because it's their choice to study or not, how much to study, to retest or not. So anytime a student is dissatisfied with their placement, they have the power to retest. It's up to them to do it. I'm happy to help them, but they definitely have the power to decide to retest if they want to. Now, we want to start students in the right class. That's the whole point of placement. We don't want them in a class that's too easy, and we don't want them in a class that's too hard. We want them in a class that's the best fit class for them and what they want to study. So if we can get students to really use the system in a way that helps them get into the right class, then we can help them make faster progress to their degree, in that students are going to spend less time in classes that they really knew most of that material anyway. If they would have spent a little bit of time repairing some gaps in ALEX, they could have gone into the next higher class. So we want to try and get people into classes that are the required class for their program, and not have them wasting time taking classes that are prerequisite classes that they really could have tested through if they would have put in some time in ALEX. So a couple of notes just before we leave. ALEX scores are not used to test out of any program requirements or cognates. ALEX is a program that lets students test into classes that they want to take. It's not a program that's used to test students out of classes that they're required to take. Now, you might have first-year students in a math class who decide they might be in the wrong class, okay? So they may get into the class and feel like the class is too easy for them or too hard for them. If the class seems too easy for the student, they can always retest and get put into the next higher class. That's not a problem. If the student thinks that the class is too hard for them, then we can still make a change to their placement. It's not like they're locked into the class. So please touch base with your students early in that first week and see how their math classes are going. Are they too easy, too hard? Does it seem like the right placement for them? I can always meet with them. Dr. Bowman can always meet with them to talk about their placement and see what we can do, whether they need to retest or we can just make a change. Also, students can use the learning modules without retesting if they want to. This is fine. Students do this quite a bit when they just want some more practice or they just want to build some confidence, right? They think they're ready, but they just want to build a little bit more confidence and be sure that they're ready. They can do that, and people like to do that sometimes without retesting because they think if they retest, we're going to push them into a really hard class that they're not ready for. And we're probably not going to do that to a student if they feel strongly that they don't want to take the more advanced class. But, you know, they don't have to retest if they're worried about retesting. If they have some anxiety about testing, they don't have to do the testing. But if they want to increase their placement, then of course the testing is going to be required. And remember that they have access to ALEKS for 1 calendar year from the date of initial access. After that, they have no longer any access to the modules or retesting in ALEKS. So more information can be found on our math placement website, or contact either myself or Mark directly, or students can also send email to us at our generic math placement website or email address, I'm sorry. So that email will come to either myself or Mark, depending on who's on call at the time. So those are some ways to contact us with some questions. So I hope that answers some of the questions people have about ALEKS. And if you have other questions, please don't hesitate to let me know or talk to Mark. I can even come and show you some things and give you access to the program if you want to look in there for your own advices and things like that. That's not a problem. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day, and goodbye.